fleshed it all out yet. One of the first things I did was like, what if this was a train bridge and you had to do this, you know, play chicken against the train? And getting the timing quite right was took a little bit of work, but hearing the like train horn come in and the moment of realization that players would have of like, probably some people die, a lot of people probably die the first time.
Man!
You have this like, do I go faster or do I turn around? Like, what do I do? I don't know.
Bă, de câte ori am murit la faza asta, vă rog? Ajutați un bătrân cu probleme de memorie. Că știu că mi-o luat ceva, cred că vreun sfert de oră mi-o luat. Ba că n-am mers suficient de repede, ba după aia am încercat să, într-adevăr, să-mi duc înapoi vreo 20 de minute. Așa mult. Așa mult. Nici un pat nu rezistă atâta. Da, păi 20 de minute să fiu călcat de un tren în mod repetat. Mamă, ce masochist. Foarte masochist. Am prea puține degete să număr. De ce ai degete amputate? Îmi pare rău.
It was a fun moment to create. All credit to Sawyer on coming up with the going underneath the bridge scenario. People to this day still are like, that freaked them the hell out. Like a lot of people would just, it's sort of seared in their memory, which is just, you know, it's what we want to do when we're creating levels.
Trying to like capture the sense of height and playing with the ambient sounds to get the, you know, just to capture the sense of being precarious and high above the ground was it was just a fun little design challenge.
David came up with that, and we play tested it. And the first time we play tested, I think the person who was play testing, their knuckles were white, and it was really tense. And of course, then someone had the brilliant idea of like, oh, they finally made it. They felt great. Now we're gonna make them go back. And the gunship, yeah, that came in, yeah. So that was always fun.
Nu e adevărat, nu-i amuzant. Gunship-urile nu sunt amuzante, bro. Gunship-urile și mai mari căcaturi.
So when you're moving, you have a friction that just reduces your normal movement rate by an amount. But what we would do is whenever players would get close to edges, we would increase that friction a lot so that people wouldn't accidentally fall off things. It's just not fun for the player, right? So there was definitely a bit of friction play involved there.
Fricție.
Gordon Freeman! Hurry, get in the basement. We're expecting gunships at any moment.
He became iconic for reasons I don't totally understand except the performance. We were calling that town New Little Odessa or Little Old New Odessa. And then I got spam email from Odessa Cubbage or something like that. It was definitely a name that came out of an email spam. And I'm like, this name is amazing. So it went straight into the game. And then John Lowry came in and acted him with his fake British accent.
Damn. Let me just send a warning to Lighthouse Point, and then I'll come right up and lend a hand.
So Odessa Cubbage had this whole problem of like training the rocket launcher. That was a real pain. The laser guiding aspect was just a nightmare to train because training in combat's always a nightmare by itself. People are under duress, trying not to die. They're focusing on some other thing that's threatening them. It's hard to observe what's going on rationally and draw lessons from it cleanly. So you always know it's going to be hard if you're trying to teach something you're trying to teach in combat. We watch a playtester, you know, they step out, fire a rocket at the gunship, and then they duck behind cover. So the laser dot goes onto the fence in front of them. We all hear the rocket turn around and start coming back and she goes louder, and then the player looks out again.
Oh, uite cum veni G-Man în chat-ul, ce coincidență.
Oh, no. And then he ducks back again, and we're like, oh my god, we hear the rocket getting louder and louder, and he peeks out again and whips off again.
An integrated part that I think has really always been important, something that Gabe introduced in Half-Life 1, was the way that we playtest and then iterate really rapidly on the playtest results. So you have dozens and dozens of people come through one section of the game, and you sit there painfully, silently, taking notes while they struggle and get frustrated and totally misunderstand your brilliant design. And then you go and you fix that over and over and over again.
If your title is game designer and your design sucks, then it can be threatening, right? Like maybe I'm bad at my job and I should get fired, right? And so a lot of the games industry never did any testing at all. With this playtesting process, that's what basically taught me design in a lot of ways. We would just, you know, we'd come up with an idea for the helicopter and then we'd be like, okay, let's put it in front of somebody and watch it happen. And then we'd very quickly start realizing that our mental model of like how people are reacting to this stuff is wildly different than what we expected.
De ce nu mă miră că jocurile care sunt marketate ca fiind foarte bune dacă nu sunt testate sau sunt netestate cum trebuie, iasă de căcat și după aia le trebuie ani de zile ca să le facă bune din nou. Și am, cred că, exemplul cel mai bun să-mi bat pula, deci... Trilogia GTA? Bă, trilogia GTA a fost făcută pe grabă, nici n-avea de ce să fie testată, știi că practic era un joc deja... Bă, Cyberpunk-ul, frate, Cyberpunk-ul testat în Cluj, cu teste de căcat, netestat suficient. Deci nu numai că e o problemă cu designul nivelurilor și așa, dar bă, să dai de bug-uri și căcaturi din astea, man, aia e nasty. Îs curios GTA 6 cum o să fie. Bun. Bine că mă bucur că ai menționat asta. Cu GTA 6 așteptările sunt atât de mari încât dacă Rockstar Games o să facă un flop cu GTA 6 o să le dea faliment compania. Da. Aia chiar o să fie ultima picătură care a umplut paharul. Serios. Bine, nu cred că o să dea chiar faliment, că au scos și titluri bune în ultimii ani. Red Dead Redemption-ul, portarea pe... O portat deja unul pe PC? L-o portat deja? Sau urmează să fie portat? Că nu mai știu dacă l-o portat deja. Deci l-o portat. Și cum e? Cum e RDR 1-ule portat pe PC? Se simte bine? E ok? E fine? Pot să facă și chestii bune dacă vor. Sunt o companie mare, dacă vor pot să facă chestii bune. Nu cred că... Nu cred că realizați ce responsabilitate mare e pe umerii Rockstar Games cu așa multe titluri GTA bune să scoată un GTA nou. Seru senti. De-aia zic că, bă, dacă nu-i bun, bye.
I joined the team in January 2000. I had met Gabe when he was starting Valve, and I was at Sierra Online. But pretty much the first thing was, Gabe was like, so when you were at Sierra, we did this deal with you for Half-Life and Half-Life 2. You need to go fix that because we don't like the deal that we did. The intellectual property for Half-Life was owned by Vivendi.
No.
The Team Fortress IP was owned by Vivendi. So it was get back our IP, get a better royalty rate, and then have the ability to experiment with online distribution. We knew we were going to grow the team. And then part of the deal was also that we were going to take on all of the funding responsibility for Half-Life 2, TF2, all those things. There was cash flow from Half-Life. We were figuring out how to do things here and there like expansion packs. A large part of it was Gabe tapping into his assets. He had done fairly well at Microsoft, not crazy well, but things started to get a little thin.
Muzică de suspans. Capitolul 5. Dat în judecată.
So I assume you guys have talked to Scott or Eric or somebody about sort of the context of the whole.
Yes, we talked to Scott, Eric, and Gabe about it.
Sierra, by that point, had become acquired by Vivendi, had worldwide distribution rights, but only for retail packaged product.
Vivendi was licensing Counter-Strike to cyber cafes. We went to Vivendi and said, hey, this is not a big deal. Just agree that this is outside of your license. And, we've spent a little bit on attorney's fees, just cover, some tens of thousands, just cover us for that. And we'll move on and just keep going. and they wouldn't do it. I
Normal
think
că nu,
some
păi
people
doar
at
dacă
Vivendi
e
did
vorba de
not
bani.
like the new deal that they ended up signing, and I think there were some hurt feelings in some quarters about that deal. When we said, hey, the cyber cafe thing, you really can't do that. Coming on top of, a year negotiations and torturous negotiations, I think that just struck an angry chord. We ended up filing the lawsuit, but really just on this narrow thing of like, hey, court, will you go just read this language and say, are they outside the
Acum au jocuri de mobile.
license or not? And Vivendi decided to go World War III.
We filed our case in Seattle, federal court in Seattle, and they hired a law firm to defend it, of course. There was some initial skirmishing about discovery. There were some disputes and motions that had to be decided by the judge, and those went all Valve's way. And then suddenly, the law firm disappeared. They hired a big scary law firm from San Francisco. They thought, okay, Valve's had some success in this case, and so we need to change their mindset from we think we're going to be successful to we're going to be destroyed. The next thing we knew, here comes this big stack of counterclaims, everything from canceling the 2001 agreement to obtaining ownership of all the Half-Life IP, to keeping us from doing Steam, to you name it. Where they included Scott and Julie Lynch and Gabe and Lisa Newell, his wife at that time, personally, as defendants.
And so it was kind of like, well, we're going to put Valve out of business, and then we're going to bankrupt the two of you. I think that was a lot of what they felt like was their path towards winning this fight.
They decided that it would have more effect and be scarier if process servers showed up at everybody's house in the night and a real bullshit move.
It's not a legal strategy. It's basically trying to intimidate you. In other words, they're saying not only are we going to take all this money from the company, but we're going to take money from you personally as well.
I can't think of another case when that happened.
They were certainly a lot bigger than we were.
Deci nu numai că au vrut să-i fută, dar au vrut să-i fută, mă. Puteau să se oprească acolo, nici nu era necesar să treacă prin toată vâlvătaia asta,
Vivendi
sincer.
was a
Deja a fost o chestie de orgoliu.
As compared to us, their funding was infinite. It felt very David versus Goliath.
Publishers at that time in the industry were used to being able to bully developers, right? And so this was really about an assertion of power as much as it was optimizing for a financial outcome. The tactics that they were using were trying to just run us out of money, right? So they knew how much money we were making because they were doing retail distribution of our games. And so they were just trying to crank up our legal costs as just another way of draining resources from the company.
We were protected from that a lot internally, so we didn't have to think about it. They did a pretty good job of letting the team concentrate on what the team could do without worrying about the future of the company so much. I mean, that was my perspective.
So yeah, I definitely was not shielded from that. The lawsuit was something where it's like created all this uncertainty around whether the game's going to come out. Vivendi was definitely trying to use that as leverage.
Deci asta au fost înainte să lanseze Half-Life 2.
There came a point where Gabe had pretty much used up his liquid assets. And he was like, should I put the house on the market? And I was like, yeah, I think it's the time where you put the house on the market if we want to keep going.
The company was pretty close to going bankrupt. I was pretty close to going personally bankrupt. We went all in. It's like there was no money left. Like,
how anxious was that for you personally?
I don't know. There's certain things that I'm kind of a weird person in a number of dimensions. Like I don't really think, oh, this is super scary. Like I don't have an emotional response to it. I just say, well, this is what we're doing. This is how, and we'll see how it plays out. So I don't think it was super stressful to me, right? I mean, it didn't really bother me. Like I was diving in South Africa recently and a shark tried to bite me a couple of times. And the people around me were way more freaked out than I was. I was like, oh, a shark's trying to bite me. I should get away from the shark. Whereas other people were having like, oh, a shark, it's trying to bite somebody, And I just think that's how I'm wired. I don't think it's anything that speaks to my character or anything. It's like I just seem to not get particularly agitated around risk. Which probably means I take on more risk than at times than most sane people would. Which can be a positive, or you can wreck a bunch of other people's lives being in the neighborhood of your risk indifference.
Mamă, câți oameni ar fi atât de dedicați cauzei lor? Uite, as the team worked, most had no idea how short of cash the studio really was. The legal fight with Vivendi would continue right up until the launch of Half-Life 2. Mă, să ajungi să spui casa la vânzare, bă. Ca să ai bani lichizi cu care să poți să susții costurile legale, mă. Tai de pula mea, mă. Crazy. Nu știu, mi se pare că ține și un pic așa de tărie de caracter și chiar, nu știu, așa în spatele cefei să ai așa o voce în aia care zice, bă, o să fie bine și o să câștigi losul. Că altfel, pe aia ajungi boschetar. Da, o fi vrut rechinuia să-și facă selfie cu Gabe. Serus Paul, spor la muncă. No, un Paul la facultate, un Paul la muncă. Dualitatea Paulilor. Malcomplianță, capitolul 6.
They're this rigidly structured, organization. Of course they're going to have this really terse language for everything they do. There's sort of an announcer voice in that follows
Mamă,
you.
ce mișto arăta sutul ăsta. Stai, unde-i? Cred că vreau să văd iarăși.
Announcer voice.
Ăsta, mamă, ce mișto arată. Ce mișto e camuflajul ăsta, să-mi bag pula în el. Foarte fain. Nu știu ce-i semnul ăsta totuși. Dar foarte brutalist
that
așa.
follows you around and kind of comments status, essentially, like how alert the world is to you. I sat down and just basically wrote a language for that so that the soldiers and the Metro cops would have jargon that they would use. Then I just used that to kind of encode. So that's where like anti-citizen one and things like that came from. Rather than saying the guy with the orange suit is causing trouble, it would be, anti-citizen one breach, scalpel something, sector something. So I basically just had this little dictionary. Then I overdid it on the vocal processing because they're all wearing these, these masks, and I wanted it to sound like they're in a mask.
And it was very deliberate to never have to shoot somebody that you can see their face. And we didn't want you killing humans. I mean, the Metro cops are humans, but we covered all the faces up. I think it was all part of this calculated and deliberate way of saying look, games don't just have to be a certain way. There's so much room in what we can do here.
Well, the Metro Police and the Combine soldiers share a lot of AI. And so there's an internal communication among them. And one of the things we did, both for the sake of difficulty and exposition, was limit the number of squad members that could be firing at the player at any given time. I think it's 2. So if you have a squad of 4, a guy who has an opportunity to shoot at the player grabs one of those slots, if it's available, and starts to shoot. And if someone else, another squad member, wants to attack the player but no slots are available, they have to find the next best thing to do, which is...
Deci e exact același sistem ca sistemul de squads pe care l-ai cu ăștia, cu rebelii, mă. Numai că tu nu-l vezi și așa-s programați și ăștia, numai că pe cealaltă parte. Holy shit! Domnul Cătă, mulțumim frumos pentru 25 de ron prin super chat. Oi. Mersi, fain. Te sărut umed și apăsat. Foarte interesantă chestia asta.
I'll get out of the scene for a second, or I'll
Nici
go
nu știam de
reload,
treaba
or
asta.
I'll
Am crezut că
throw a
pur și
grenade.
simplu
And that
funcționează
was all
individual
stuff
cumva.
that we learned building Half-Life 1, and I think got a lot better at.
Îmi place că și ăsta din gameplay
Half-Life 2
pușcă
used
cu
a node
RPG-ul,
graph
deși
system.
foarte
You know,
nenecesar.
hand-placed nodes by developers in the levels would describe a really super low fidelity version of the environment for the AI to use.
It enabled the level designers to sort of inject and puppeteer a little bit the AIs in ways that were just easier for them to sort of be in control, as opposed to having to grab an animator or a programmer to be able to get really cool things into the game.
Da. F chat pentru Laszlo. Cea mai luminată minte a generației sale.
A really obvious piece of gameplay. Physics is really fun to manipulate. We just thought,
chiar a fost fun.
hey, you know, you could build your own path. You know, we'd already seen players who enjoyed moving stuff around, like and building bridges and stuff, and like we don't have enough moments where like
poți de exemplu și să-ți bagi pula în mecanică și pur și simplu să mergi pe nisip și să-i omori pe toți și aia.
We've barely done that in the whole game.
And the fact that you're laying stuff down on the floor means that the finesse required to do like precise placement wasn't necessary, right? You're like, I just want to place it here, and it doesn't matter the orientation. You just kind of jump on it and you do the next one and so on, right? And also like training was like we didn't have to train. It was like stand off the sand, and it was like, oh, it's floor.
Laszlo, the finest mind of his generation.
Figure that one out.
He tells you exactly how to do it.
Someone's coming. You there! Stop where you are! Stay on the rocks! Don't step on the sand! It makes the antlions crazy! Laszlo, don't move! No! Help!
Nu, Laszlo! Ce moment tragic.
Dear God! Poor Laszlo! The finest mind of his generation! To come to such an end. We were heading for the Vortigaunt camp, hoping to pick up some bug baits so these damn things would leave us alone. But without Laszlo, what's the point?
Jesus.
You just give these NPCs a name at the moment they die.
Ei aveau o relație.
Fans fill in their whole life story and
o relație
give them something
nu chiar
to
platonică, aș zice.
The free man will have need of these pheropods on the paths ahead. Gather them now.
Nova Prospekt
Ce să faci, mă, Loții? Dar oricum puteai să te joci oricum.
Balls were really fun because it lets you experience them in a different way, and it was
mai aveam tabără fără
classic
Laszlo.
example of
Aici îmi plăcea de
getting the most value out of technology investments that people could.
I remember the beach thing. The design intention was definitely to make it feel like a sort of D-Day beach landing. You didn't come from the water, but you're storming up towards these old gun emplacements. If I remember right, with combine in them, and you're like invading the bunkers, and you're bringing your horde with you. You're overwhelming.
Cum îi cheamă? Rareș. Stai că mai țin minte. Un gândac era Rareș. Celălalt era Bogdan. Cum pula aia zis-mul ăștia?
These in-place defenses. It was surprising how much chaos you could get away with. Like I remember we did a lot of tuning to make sure to get the outlines spawned. We had difficulties from time to time with like design some choke point or challenge or whatever, and the antline flow rate wasn't enough to make it feel chaotic. Like we had an atmospheric goal too. It wasn't just about like mechanically can you overcome this. You wanted to feel like your forces have stormed the walls, they're everywhere, there's chaos all around you. And so a lot of the tuning was about achieving that feeling, not just about mechanically getting past the enemies.
Băi, era un pic greu Nova Prospekt.
Nova Prospekt was different than a lot of the maps that I worked on, at least, is that in that we had some early art prototypes that were done. We have this whole concept of like zoo maps, we call them, which are basically like little art test scenes, how they would fit together, and some basic lighting.
But by the time our cabal got to Nova Prospekt, we knew we were coming in with antlions and with bug bait. And so we already knew that a bunch of stuff was going to change because we had to support, you know, you and your army of antlions fighting combine soldiers. Antlions looked great whenever they were being shot by anyone. Like particle flecks flying off, and you know, they always looked great. And so setting them up against combine soldiers looked great. Setting them up against turrets looked great.
Those were super fun scenarios to work on.
Mie cel mai mult îmi plăcea să arunc coiuțul și după aia să apară random de undeva ăștia. Nici măcar să n-aibă sens de unde apare, ieșeau din pământ în pula mea, deci era foarte cool chestia aia.
No, because having these antlines that you could just use in any way you wanted was really fun. Like, and coming from the coast, like just the contrast of like shrinking everything down and then just piling it full of stuff was a lot of fun.
The first time I saw one of those, I think it was Ted Backman's concept,
I just thought, I can't believe that I get to use a creature this cool in level design. Like these guys are really, really, really fun to use. I remember Kelly Bailey had created a short list, things like he wanted flocking flyers and he wanted a moving guard tower, which was the first description of the Strider, was a mobile guard tower. So I saw that and immediately understood that, you know, kind of...
Hey! Mă, ăsta arată un pic cam sas. Arată, zici că e ca un... Nu știu dacă arată ca un ștruț. Pare că zici că arată ca un ștruț sau zici că e ceva dinozaur de la preistoric cu gâtul lung. Dar ăla de dinainte arăta de parcă era un coius dezbrăcat. Stai. Dar nu-l mai prind acum. Și foarte păros. Bă, dar toate trebuiau să fie păroase, mă, să-mi va pula. Serus Budor. 16 luni de comandantus Maximus cu aie. Aia zic. Ai luat post la farmacie? Mult succes. Era și cazul. Era și cazul, bă. Era și cazul. Bag acolo, că vezi, bă, munca grea se răsplătește. Bagă mare acolo. Mersi frumos de membru și mă bucur să aud veștile astea bune de la tine, mă. Aștept să mai vorbim iarăși, domnul meu.
Orchestrating the
ne auzim la o lozincă.
trying to get the most variety and the most breadth of shape and movement and experience was the correct way to move forward.
The design for that first Strider map was something I came up with and I was really passionate about. It was all about like running across and just getting like one shot in your tush.
La un lucicoș.
Right, just as you made it through.
Even just hearing the sound of them walking, like, you know, okay, there's like a boss nearby. You just see the legs walking by, but you can't see the body. Like, there are so many things you can do with these guys.
Honestly, there were still people on the team, I think, that were still thinking that we were going to bomb. That people are just going to not be impressed.
When did you know it was going to be good?
E3.
Yep. E3. Yeah, I'd say the same thing.
Yeah, it seems like at some point there was an E3 demo that we got together that we didn't end up showing, but at least at that point it just felt like, oh wow, we actually have made something here.
We went through and made a bunch of demos for 2002, and everybody looked at them and was like, we're still not confident about this, and we don't think we've hit the bar, so we're not going to go at all. Like, they had totally planned to go. And then when 2003 rolled around, I just remember everyone was still terrified. We were like, okay, how are we going to craft everything we've had into like a number of messages about what this product is? And like, we came up with like the core theme of each one of these movies.
Oh, do be careful.
We didn't really understand at the time, I think, the embarrassment of riches that we had. We looked at it from two angles. One was a set of technical features, a sort of conceptual listing of things that we thought were important, you know, like physics and things like that. And then the other side was content-based. What areas of the game were innovative, what areas of the story we thought were compelling, which characters we thought were worth people paying attention to. And so it was an interesting sort of marriage of which features and which content are the best showcase for all those things. A lot of what was in the demos was rendering technology, but I think the stuff that felt the strongest to most of us at the time was really physics-based. So something looks like wood, then it sounds like wood, scrapes like wood, floats like it.
Mă, încă mai au filmările originale.
To people at that time, it was pretty mind-blowing just to watch be able to pick things up, knock other things over, use things in a way that felt true to a three-dimensional reality. Maybe it's on those videos, I don't remember, but people were gasping and, you know, hitting the people next to them because they couldn't really believe what they were seeing on the screen. There's no limitation on the complexity of those interactions. So it's this level of believable and consistent interactivity that opens the door to a wide variety of new gameplay mechanics. This will run on my 486. You know, that person who was talking about a 486, like obviously it's just about, like, you must have a supercomputer behind, like, how are you even doing this?
what is going on?
Bă, și adevărul era că nici măcar nu-ți trebuia un PC așa bun să-l joci.
The lines outside the booth became enormous, and it was the thing that it really distorted the rest of E3 because so many people were anxious to come see our demo.
And I remember seeing this absolutely enormous line with like some pretty well-known people in there, right? Miyamoto was in line for this stuff, and like
Will Wright, I think.
Yeah, Will Wright. There was a bunch of, and so then like yeah, after that was all done, like people on the team were just like, okay, we are ready. We can ship this game. We know we've got something good. It was really easy at that point. Like it felt like we were rolling the ball downhill after
Until it leaked.
Until it leaked.
Mamă, leak-ul, tați. Half-Life 2 E3 Reaction. Asta era arhiva de atunci. Ia că se aud oamenii de pe fundal.
5 years. It looks like hell. Wow.
We've been rather busy in your absence, Mr. Freeman.
The Source Engine gives us capabilities in 4 main areas. Believable and realistic human beings, graphics that were previously impossible outside a Hollywood movie studio, an integrated materials and physics system that create an unprecedented level of interactivity, and artificial intelligence that welds all these things together into an experience gamers have never had before. A huge number of details go into creating a character like the G-Man. His eyes glint based on a radiosity calculation of the local illumination. They self-shadow and follow you as you move. He has 40 separate muscles in his face, and his emotions are based on a taxonomy of facial expressions created by Dr. Paul Ekman, a research psychiatrist. This same system that gives him...
Attention, Mr. Freeman. I'm only going to say this once.
Allows him to speak. And he can do it just as easily in any other language as English.
那么，看来我们是没有合作的机会了。
Nu te cred. Bă, eu n-am mai văzut video ăsta de mult, mă, dar am uitat că l-au pus să vorbească în chineză, mă, pe G-Man. Bă, Cicus, bă, ăsta o să-l salvez pe mai încolo. Ăsta o să-l salvez pe mai încolo. Această